Hello, peoples of the internet. Today I have Eric Goodman with me, who is an agent of change, and we'll be hearing more about how he became an agent of change, specifically developing business strategies and business leaders. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you, Mike. It's such a pleasure to join you today.
Thanks for joining us as well and for coming on here, sharing all your experience. Obviously, you're a very high level coach, a very experienced educator as well. So I really look forward to hearing from you about all the things we discuss here on Coach Professionally. Eric, how did you get into this field?
Great question, Mike. And I really recognized pretty early on in the corporate world that I had some unique talents in terms of my ability to coach. And having grown up playing sports, and I recognized the similarities in terms of developing people. And so I had an opportunity when I was working for a very large billion-dollar company to develop probably more managers that were able to develop into managerial roles and high potential employees, and was recognized as that person that could go in and help turn around some individuals. And so that was my inclination. And then I found myself being a lifelong learner. I always was interested in learning more. And very early on, I was fascinated with high performers and what differentiated them. And so I studied a field called neuro linguistic programming. And this was something a friend of mine actually back in told me about a guy named Tony Robbins that was coming to a local hotel to do something called a fire walk. And I was like, that's really interesting. And long story short, I went to that and was sucked into this whole field of NLP, and obviously studied it for hundreds and hundreds of hours, becoming a practitioner and later a master practitioner in the field, and integrating it, though, really into the business world for many years, and finding myself, you can separate really business from personal life. And so a lot of times in the conversations I'd have with employees or other people I was leading, helping them holistically in what they were doing in the workplace. And ultimately went back and got some advanced degrees, my master's degree, and then also my PhD in business administration, and found myself as a professor. But I think the similarity with coaching was, in coaching, my belief is that people have the answer within them. And your job is to facilitate their greatness and them becoming the best version of themselves, which is really, in the classroom, it's the same thing, whether it was a student fresh out of high school or an executive corporate program that we were teaching. That was the commonality. And so after being a professor, very quickly moved into administrative roles, spending over a decade as a business school dean, including leading one of the largest universities, or the College of Business, at least in the US, and moving into other C-suite, VP of Education, Chief Academic Officer roles. And about 7 years ago, decided that it was time for me to really focus more on bringing the coaching and some of the business knowledge to individuals and organizations so that they could maximize their potential. And so that's been fun. And obviously, prior to that time, I also got involved back in 20 some years ago in coaching organizations, getting certified and other things beyond NLP, certified as a coach, and also just a number of other things. I'm always looking for game changing tools to add to my toolbox that will help me as a coach and facilitator. And myself, I'm, as a coach, always going through coaching programs to learn more. I've been through several already this year, 2 different 12-month programs. I'm in the midst of another 6-month program that I'm personally going through so that I can become, even at the highest level, certified as a coach.
Yeah, quite a journey. NLP, that's your foundation, that's your background with Tony Robbins. And then, of course, you went into the academic field. NLP was established, or it was started by Milton Erickson, wasn't it, if I'm not mistaken?
A lot of it draws on Erickson's work, but it was really started by John Grinder and Richard Bandler. And they were people that took work of Erickson and Virginia Satir and other people that were masters at affecting individual level change into this field. And it's basically neuro, meaning your brain, and linguistic is language. And obviously, everything we do, all of our thoughts and things that we experience in the world, are related to how we represent the world: visual, auditory, kinesthetic,
Mm.
touch, and taste, and understanding how the brain codes information and how you can change those representations quickly to actually create change, unlike other areas. And I should share with you, I was always fascinated with psychology, even. And so that fit really well, having studied Gestalt and Fritz Perls and other people like that in terms of therapeutic models to intervene and help people. So, yeah, it's a fascinating field and it has continued to evolve. And obviously, people have taken it in different directions. But that basis, I would say that was probably, other than some psychology classes and some self assessments I had taken, that was my basis for really having the experience of coaching and working with people as individuals, and then having the opportunity to go into businesses and apply that lens and training, particularly around communication through NLP, into organizations to help people become higher performers.
It's very interesting how NLP works on the brain, really. I actually encountered coaching through NLP as well. In the early days, I think I've written
Uh-huh.
an article about this. First, I heard about Deepak Chopra coaching Bill Clinton, and then, of course, Tony Robbins came, and then I encountered NLP. And then I started reading from Chomsky, which is not,
Yeah,
it's just linguistic programming, right? Chomsky,
exactly.
but it works the same way on the brain, interestingly, and it's a very curious field, I find. So
Mhm.
fantastic that you did that. And Fireball, that was a huge thing back in the 90s. I remember that. And
Right.
I remember Tony Robbins getting a huge amount of criticism for that as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. There was a couple cases where it didn't go well. And obviously when you're talking fire, there's some health risks, and but in general, they did a very good job of making sure that people were prepared and in the appropriate physiological state to be able to do it successfully.
So
Um,
you did it, you walked.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
That must have been quite an experience.
There was. And I think and that's with a lot of the coaching work that I do around mindset and limiting beliefs is helping shift those very quickly. And so between coaching things and other things that I've learned through NLP and just neuroscience in general in terms of how we capture and create stories in our brain about things, how you can shift those and write a new story and create a new identity, even in some cases, that allows you to do some things that seemingly maybe impossible. Like, how can you do that and not be burned? Right. But obviously, we know a lot more about the power of the mind to heal and do other things as well now than we did 30 years ago.
That's really interesting because so many people bring a baggage from childhood, right? We conditioned them, programmed in childhood by our
Absolutely.
parents, right? And they
Hmm.
program you a certain way. And sometimes you just have to reprogram yourself to your own identity and allow yourself to live up to your full potential, because let's face it, your parents in some cases, they were under a lot of stress and they were juggling life, and they may have got it wrong. They may have put you in
Hmm.
a certain framework within certain limitations and not allowed you to fully grow into who you really are and what you're really capable of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, that's where most things are formed by, for most people, by the age of 7. You're pretty well set in some of those beliefs and value system because you're surrounded by that. There's epigenetics, but there's also the environment that shapes who you are as a human being. And a lot of parents parent the child they wish they have, not the one that they actually have, and recognizing who they're raising and what their personality is and how to really connect and bring out the best of them rather than living vicariously through their kids. And that a lot.
By the age of 7, as early as that.
Yeah, a lot of the things. And you don't think about how many messages, even the things that we hear, how many times are you told no as a child, right? Or maybe be careful, you're up on that playground equipment or whatever, or don't fall. It's like where attention goes, energy flows. And it's Carl Walenda walking that tight wire rope. If you're focusing on don't fall, what are you going to do? Don't
Yeah.
think of a pink elephant. If I say don't do something, you got to access it in your brain. And so we have a lot of those messages, but oftentimes a belief about what's possible or money or other things that may enter into that in terms of your own worth as a human being that shape who you are and what's possible. So really in the work that I do, I help people rewrite those narratives, and you can do it without going through hundreds of hours. There's some amazing other therapeutic approaches that do work. At the same time, if there's a way to do that very quickly where you can help somebody shift some of those patterns that were formed over several decades, in their youth and childhood to become the best version of themselves. Like, why wouldn't you want to embrace game-changing tools and strategies and approaches that allow you to do that?
So, if there was somebody listening who would like to make a change in their life, can you share a tip, like a quick hack that they can do to start out on that journey, maybe?
So part of it is obviously you want to do this with somebody who understands the coaching process in terms of where, especially if it is something where you're going back to a childhood memory or things like that. But you can think about anything, and understanding part of it becomes self-awareness. What are you aware of? And when you have a feeling of maybe lack or limiting belief or whatever, just noticing like what beyond the thought that enters into your brain, there's some thought that occurs, and we have thousands of thoughts every day. A lot of them are outside of our conscious awareness, and it's just the automatic pilot that our brain is on because we've done certain things, habits, and routines a certain way for so many years. Ultimately, it's the awareness is the first part of the process, is to become aware of what are you noticing, what are the thoughts you notice, and then with the thought, is there a feeling? Because everything is wired in our body in terms of emotions that we experience, particularly things that were emotionally charged as a child, and some of the things or maybe labels that we add about being shy or being a bully or whatever. You live into some of those things and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think the first step is just becoming aware of it and noticing those feelings and figuring out where it's at. And our body keeps things in different locations, and different parts of our body store different things. And it's all our human body is an amazing thing in terms of where different types of emotions really get encoded, if you will, and wired into our brain and our body. And so there are different types of techniques, but I think just encouraging people to become aware and noticing those thoughts. And I think just a basic hack is, okay, is there some truth to this thought or belief? Like, where did it come from? And what part of me is like suggesting this? Like, I'm not good at managing money, or like, I'm not worthy of finding a soulmate, or whatever beliefs you might have that limit you. I'm not good enough to become a CEO of a company. It could be whatever it is, but understanding like, okay, why do I believe that? And what evidence do I have to support that? So part of it's just getting curious and questioning, because we accept so easily some of those things. And then there's a lot of other cool tools that are strategies that I help facilitate in those conversations when I'm coaching a client, to be able to shift very quickly and get to the root cause and rewrite and recreate a future version of themselves. And one thing I will share is that our mind is so powerful that it really doesn't understand the difference between something that is vividly experienced and imagined. And when I say vividly, I'm not just talking visually, I'm talking auditory, I'm talking touch, I'm talking taste and sound, all those senses coming together, and smell, your five senses, and maybe a sixth sense, to be able to experience something as if it's already happened. And to almost like in sports, how you do an instant replay. I don't know if you were watching any sports this weekend. They have the instant replay. You can do a pre-play of what it would be like to step into your greatness, having whatever resources you need to move forward with, that basically are the complete opposite of maybe some patterns you've had in the past. So that's in a verbal way, some things that might be helpful for individuals. But again, it's not something that's why we have people that are qualified, that have had thousands of hours of training and experience in working with people, to be able to help facilitate people to move through it very quickly in a way that they can get the change. But awareness is a key. And I certainly, one thing I will share with you, and I think it'd be beneficial for people that are listening to that, I'd be honored to share with them a complimentary personality report, because a lot of what happens in our personality is based on our values, and our values ultimately shape our beliefs, that shape our thoughts, that shape how we feel, that ultimately shape our actions and our results, right? And it becomes our character and our destiny if you don't think about it and if it doesn't come into your awareness. So if people would like to go to crackmycode.com/communicate, you can do something where you actually get a very quick understanding of yourself by sorting a couple of cards. And it take you less than 90 seconds. You'll get back a complimentary report, typically a dollar value, but I want to share that with your listeners because it's an incredible tool to understand yourself. But the other part of it is there's some tools in there to help you understand how to communicate effectively with others. And for parents to understand, oh, there are people that are wired differently, and not always do they appreciate the same type of communication. And so it's that awareness. It's really emotional intelligence. This is a tool that helps you understand yourself, and so you can regulate your own emotions, but it also gives you insight into somebody else and what makes them tick, so you can interact with them more appropriately and not have some of the things that maybe triggered you in the past trigger you, because you begin recognizing it's not personal. It's just their personality, and that's who they are, because that's their identity and how they were brought up, right?
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's going to be a really valuable tool for our listeners. So if you just want to go on to crackmycode.com/communicate, you
Mm-hmm.
can download Eric's, or you can take Eric's personality test. That will help you communicate better, and that will help you get started on your personal development journey, or progress if you have already started the journey. It sounds
Yeah.
fantastic, Eric. And you mentioned a couple of things in the beginning. You mentioned that there is, I'm not good with money. I'm not worthy of a fulfilling relationship. I'm not worthy to be a CEO of a company. Are these the typical issues that you as a coach deal with?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things. I would say the imposter syndrome is a big one, where
What's imposter syndrome?
sometimes people have risen to their level of incompetence, or what they perceive as being incompetent, or others, the Peter principle. But in part, there's sometimes self-sabotage that goes on. And that's what I mean by imposters. I'm pretending to be somebody I'm not, or maybe I'm not really like worthy. If I am this CEO, or if I'm this leader, if I'm in a healthy relationship, do I really deserve it? And sometimes people will self-sabotage because there's a part of them that doesn't believe that they deserve it, that their self-esteem and self-worth justifies it. So that's one of the things. But yeah, I find a lot of times people have limiting beliefs about what's possible. And to help people begin recognizing and thinking about, what would they do if there were no limits? How big would they dream if failure wasn't an option? In fact, I like to think about, in the coaching I do, I help people rethink some of the mindset they've had. And if you're familiar with the work of Carol Dweck around mindset, you understand there's a fixed mindset, which is, I'm born this way. I have a certain level of intelligence and of capability, and it's fixed, and my IQ is set a certain way, versus a growth mindset where I can actually continue to learn and grow. And in fact, there's no such thing as failure. It's only feedback, as long as I learn from it. In fact, I want to fail faster so I can develop my skills more quickly. So helping people rethink maybe some beliefs or patterns about things that no longer serve them is part of that. So does that help answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. I recently spoke to a gentleman whose business got acquired, and he was hugely successful, worked with massive corporate accounts worldwide. And I asked him, what was the key to your success? And he said, just doing things. He said, don't be afraid to fail. Like, inevitably, mistakes happen. It's okay to make mistakes. It's not okay to repeat them. That's what he told me. It was a really good insight. I appreciated that a lot. That you go and do things in life, and you just have to put your head down and get the work done. And if it doesn't work out, it's fine, as long as you learn from it and next time you do it better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it resonates so well with what you just said about the growth mindset, that people need to think what's possible. No limitations. Just imagine how you want things to be and just go for it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we only live once, right? So we might as well make the most of it.
That's right. And you never know how long that's going to be. To recognize every minute you have is precious. And that's really important. And I experienced that firsthand a little over 12 years ago, and actually 3 months to the day, when my dad was killed in a car accident. And when you have those types of experiences, you recognize the sanctity of life, and that every day is an opportunity to make a difference and to live up to your potential. Not, and you don't know what that is, but And someone once said the definition of hell is being on your deathbed and meeting the person you could have become. And I think that is a reminder to take whatever steps you want, because I think most people recognize within them that there's more. There's something more that they could be doing in life, whether it's in their career, whether it's in their relationships, in their social circles, or financially, health wise, whatever it is. It's time waits for no one. It keeps ticking. And the other thing as a coach, I do a lot around is helping people rewire not only their brain, but then how do you create habits that last? And whether it's stopping smoking, eating healthy, nutrition, whatever it is, a lot of times those things enter into it, because when I'm doing work with individuals, particularly leaders in organizations, making sure that they have the energy they need to sustain and be the best version of themselves and lead others is really critical. So helping them understand the hacks to be able to do that is really valuable. So.
Exactly, and time is so critical in this, just like you say, because everybody only has 24 hours a day. Even the richest person can't have more than the same
Mhm.
24 hours as you and I do, and as the next person who might be listening. That we all have 24 hours, and it's just about how we utilize those 24 hours and what we do with it. That's the
Exactly.
only difference.
Yeah. And part of it with a lot of the work that I do, particularly with leaders and business owners, entrepreneurs, people like that, find themselves doing a lot of work. In fact, I just got off of a call right before this with the CEO, who's this week, he's going to be delivering a message to his team, and he's going to be focusing on his gift. What is my sweet spot in terms of, it's like the 80-20. I don't know if you're familiar with Pareto, and Vilfredo Pareto, Italian economist, but he really, 20% of what we focus on gives us 80% of the results. 80% of the things we focus on gives us 20% of the results. So there's diminishing returns. So it's understanding, what is the 20%? What am I really uniquely talented doing? And how do I step into that and eliminate the 80% that's returning diminishing returns, basically? And so understanding that can go a long way when you look at people really being focused on how they use their time, because a lot of people are doing $10 an hour work when they don't need to be. They need to find people that can do that work so they can focus on what they do best, as an analogy, if that makes sense.
I couldn't agree with you more once again, Eric. So you just mentioned you just got off a call with the CEO. Are you typically working with large corporations, medium size, or what sort of clients do you typically work with? In fact,
I work with clients from all ranges, from the solopreneur to, I've done work within some of the Fortune 100, 500 companies. So it does vary. And I think what's interesting is it doesn't matter the size of the organization, the issues are the same.
oh
Magnified,
really?
obviously, if you're talking about $1 billion company. But if you're talking a startup entrepreneur, in fact, I spoke at an event in North America, at least, the largest entrepreneurial event of its kind, just a little over 2 weeks ago, with 10,000 plus people. Those people, those individuals, have the same struggles and challenges that somebody who's been a CEO of a major company that they have, because we're all human beings and we all have doubts, concerns, and fears, and that's what makes us human, right? And so that's really powerful when you recognize that. From a organizational perspective, I do enjoy working with larger organizations where I can go in and train teams of people or leaders, and ultimately bringing in tools. I do work with coaching on sales teams, with some powerful tools. And so to really optimize their sales, in many cases, tripling conversion rates. I typically see conversion rates go from 20 to 75, 80%. So if you're in a business, and every business has to have sales, it's an important skill to have. But also, when we talk sales, it's really about myself being an influence and leadership coach, because everything you do in life in some way is sales. When you think about it, it's influencing somebody else. And so translating those skills to people who are leading internally, leading their people to become something, or build a business that is hitting or exceeding whatever goals they thought possible, to be able to 10x maybe what linear path they're on, versus really understanding that you have an opportunity in every organization to communicate more effectively, to sell yourself. You're always selling yourself, even if you're an employee, to get a raise, to get a promotion, whatever that is. So understanding that.
Get your idea executed, right?
Yeah,
That's the skill as
absolutely.
well.
So whether you're selling your coaching services or any product or service, it's all about sales. So I think understanding that is really powerful. And so I work with a wide range, and it's different types of coaching versus training that I also do. I'll do training with organizations to help them build high performing cultures centering around communication, things like emotional intelligence, and optimizing other tools, and business strategy. I loved strategic planning. So that's another piece. But really helping people as a coach, I do that with them for their life. What's your strategic plan for your life? For who you are and where you want to go? What's your North Star? Where are you going? And how do you execute so that you can become the best version of yourself and maximize your potential, whether it's individually or for an organization you're building?
It's really interesting to hear that solopreneurs or small business owners have similar struggles on a smaller scale than big company CEOs or big company managers and leaders. When you said in the beginning that you were very curious about what sets the high achievers apart from the rest, what have you discovered?
Such a great question. There's a lot of things I've discovered. So that would be a whole nother conversation. Well, let me share a couple of things, though. Obviously, key for that, for a high achiever, it really starts with mindset. And that's something that understanding the power of the mind and beliefs and systems. And even when you look at high performing athletes, the work that has been done around that, and understanding mindset and being able to regulate and control your emotions. And that's why I think we know now that it's not IQ that is responsible for the success of individuals moving up the corporate ladder. It's EQ, or emotional intelligence, that really is the game changer, because it's not only about your understanding yourself and figuring yourself out so you can manage and regulate your emotions, but understanding other people and having skills of influence and to be able to do that. Now, you don't have to have maybe the as much of the interpersonal skills to be a high performer, but it certainly helps. There's some amazing athletes that you would say, arguably, they don't have a lot of that tact or skill in terms of how they relate to other people, but they're so good. But that's what differentiates people like the Michael Jordans that are team players versus maybe that solo athlete. But I think it's the tenacity, it's the grit, and the things you were talking about that person shared with you. It's, you know what, you want to fail and you want to make sure you're learning from it. You just don't repeat that mistake. And so how you approach things with tenacity or resilience, another word, or grit, the work by Angela Duckworth, like understanding how you can build that in to an individual and how you can develop it. Again, we can develop any of these things in life. And it's a lot of the mindset and attitudes around what you're doing that really differentiates those people that are high performers versus those that don't ever get there. Because most of the time, the limiting belief isn't outside of us, it's right here.
That's right.
Yeah.
So true, so true. So what's the biggest transformation that you have seen in your career?
The biggest transformation I've seen. Wow, that's a tough question, because I've seen people quit smoking and lose hundreds of pounds and physical transformations. But I have seen, I would say there's a couple individuals that maybe were not very self aware in leadership roles really do a 180. I've seen that. And I think for people to transform that had a reputation of being maybe arrogant or callous and just all about the money or certain things in terms of how they led an organization, to really shift their approach as a leader to become more of a servant leader. And I've seen that with a number of individuals. And I think part of it's maturity, but and it's also a recognition of what you don't know about how you're being perceived, and the short term versus the long term impact of that in terms of maybe why you're doing what you're doing. Because a lot of those things go back to the conversation we were having before about things that are learned maybe at an early age. And every behavior we have has some positive intention behind it. And usually there's some self survival or protective mechanisms that we have. And it's understanding that and then utilizing those in a way that we can change who we want to be. And that's what's rewarding about the coaching work, is to be able to see those transformations. So there's not one that stands out. There's so many. And what's the best part of that is recognizing that people are in a better place. And that's my goal as a coach, is to help individuals, to help organizations maximize whatever it is they're doing so they can bring their gift to the world.
So, what's the greatest success story your clients had?
Again, the greatest success story, there's not one that stands out. And I would say the same thing about, people would ask that, like, when I was in the education and higher education as a dean and chief academic officer, one of the best days of the year was graduation, or days. If we had both semesters, we had graduations going on. But ultimately, and people were asked, who was the best student? You have your valedictorian or the equivalent or the speakers or things like that, or who stands out. And there's so many, because everybody has a different story. And
Mm,
all relative to appreciate as a human being, because I've seen people that have founded multi-million, 7, 8 figure companies that went on to lose it all and then rinse and repeat. And some of those, I think about, my God, what would it be like to lose a 8 figure company? And in one case, an individual in that process lost his wife and family and just a lot of other ripple effects, be able
mm.
to transform and turn that around and get back up and be successful. Things
Oh,
like that are cool. And it's a testimony to the resilience, because everyone is going through different things and you don't know what that's like. And so to cross any sort of threshold, and I use the analogy of the graduation, what it took for one student to get to that point is different from another student. And it's the same thing in life. What it took for one person to transform, and what may have been a transformation of, again, I'll go back to the health analogies, because that comes up oftentimes. And it's okay, let's talk about that and what you're doing, because your body, you have one body, one life, right? And you want to maximize your energy. So for somebody to stop smoking or stop drinking or lose, weight, those are major transformations. And I don't think you can compare that and say, oh, that person was less successful than the person that built a company and exited for X millions of dollars, or maybe built something up from nothing. Because they're all relative in their impact, because they're changing lives, right? And that's the common thread.
I can see where you're coming from. That it's really relative because everybody's coming from a different background, different circumstances, and it's relative to what people want to achieve, and different people want to achieve different things, and they go about it in different ways. It's about the journey to help them get there. Very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I experienced the differences in different people and those high achievers. And my dad grew up in the South Side of Chicago, which were like the government projects and stuff. So
Oh,
subsidized housing and things like that. And to see the transformation that can occur with people when they put their mind to it and they focus on becoming better is amazing. And as a child, I would compare myself. Why do they? You drive through these neighborhoods, you see these huge houses and things, and there's other things obviously that people have, and you start comparing yourself. So I really think you've got to compare yourself to what you're capable of, and are you transforming yourself in what is possible? And I think that's the
mm.
baseline.
It's great. It's a great message. Anything is possible. I like
Mhm.
that. I like that. So, what would you say is the biggest differentiator between teaching and coaching?
Oh, I think the philosophy of coaching, again, as a teacher, although it's shifting because there's so much information out there, but you think about the typical teacher, it's like they're the sage on the stage, like they know everything, versus being the guide on the side, which is facilitating. And as a coach, you're the guide on the side. And the difference is, I don't come to you with all the knowledge and wisdom. That's not my goal. If I was consulting or training, then I do that. Or if I'm teaching, I do that. And I can bring those into the coaching process if someone's struggling with some specific area, because I do have a wide range of knowledge in a lot of business areas. Having said that, as a coach, it's really facilitating the discovery of the best version of somebody and helping them realize that, and understanding that they have the skills and capabilities to create the life they imagine in all aspects of their life. Again, it's not just in their career, financial, physical, health, spiritual, all those different family relationships. It's like looking at it holistically and helping people understand and identify where are their gaps, but more importantly, what are the things that are really important, and what are the things that you want to become the best version of yourself and to live the life that you've always imagined. And that's really, as a coach, it's drawing that out, and it's not being like prescriptive as a teacher. This is how you do this. There's no one way in coaching. There's so many different ways of getting there. And it's understanding that the client has everything they need, and it's just bringing out the best of them. And in some ways, teachers do that in the classroom. They help students recognize their own genius. And at the same time, they're imparting oftentimes maybe more information that the curriculum or the standards dictate that they have to talk about math and science and other subject areas in terms of information they're sharing. So that's how I would, at a high level. There's a lot of other distinctions, but that's probably the biggest difference.
So one of the greatest blessings and curses of our generation and the times today is that people just have so many options. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
they always have unlimited options. So, what would you say to those who are struggling to choose what they want out of life, or who are struggling to design the life that they really want?
I think, first of all, there's people like me that can help assist them getting clear on what it is that they really value. I think you've got to start from a place of values and what's important to you. And that's where that um, little personality thing that I shared at crackmycode.com/communicate can help you understand your values. And because your values, you want to be aligned in living your life with your values and what's most important to you. And so I think until you can get really clear on your values, you're going to have a tough time figuring out like which direction do I go and understanding that. So there's a lot of other processes related to that to understand what is it that you're doing when you're in the zone and energy flows and you love what you're doing. Would you be doing it if money were no object and you weren't paid for it? What would that look like? But what are those things you're passionate about? What are the hobbies and other things? A lot of times that can be leave clues. Or what did you think about when you were a kid that you dreamt of doing? And then society, or maybe your parents told you, you can't do that because you won't make any money, or you're not good enough to do that, or whatever. But to revisit some of those things can be really powerful. I always believe you've got to get clear on your values, though, because that you want to live a life that's aligned to your values. Otherwise, you're living out somebody else's life.
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing advice. That's amazing advice. And there is so much outside influence about what you should be valuing as well. I suppose
Mm-hmm.
all the companies are selling, right? So they're trying to ingrain values in you that are not necessarily there, and people buy into these values and they attain those products and services and goods and whatever, and ultimately they don't feel fulfilled. They feel void, like, because it's not from them. It doesn't come from what they value. So discovering these values is so very important. So it's great that you said that. I really find it very valuable.
Love hearing that, Mike. Thank you.
All right. So if anybody is maybe struggling about finding the direction, what they value and what they want to accomplish, or they want to improve their leadership skills, business skills, sales skills, even, where can they
Mhm.
find you, Eric?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and it's just Eric Goodman with the number 2 after it. You'll recognize my picture, but LinkedIn's a great place to connect. And then again, take advantage of that complimentary test that I'm offering, because that will help you start and understand a little bit more about yourself and your values.
Thank you for sharing that, Eric, and thank you for joining our podcast today as well. Thank you all who listened. If you found our podcast with Eric useful, valuable, please hit subscribe and follow us on social media so that you can hear about all the professional coaches we'll be talking to in the upcoming weeks and months. Thank you for joining, and bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.